Well, this has been a very interesting day, a tiring day, and there were very interesting, fascinating, brilliant, and very emotional speeches. So I had almost hoped I would have had the chance to think again overnight and talk tomorrow, but I'll certainly follow the call of duty. So dear friends of the Belgrade Forum, dear Zivadin Jovanovic, thank you very much for the possibility to speak here and to participate. So I'm a mathematics professor at Humboldt University, the second natural scientist at this conference, and I represent a group called the Darmstädter Signal. That's a group of active and retired soldiers in Germany, most from the West German Bundeswehr, that continues on as an ever more eager member of the NATO alliance, and also the now defunct East German Army, NVA, National Volksarmee. So the Darmstädter Signal was founded in 1983 as a protest in opposition to the installation of Pershing missiles by NATO, and they had nuclear heads, of course, and were placed in Germany, supposedly in response to the threat posed by the Soviet SS-20 missiles and the Warsaw Pact in general. So I personally, at the time, believed all that stuff. I even left the Social Democratic Party because I thought it was veering too much to the left. And in the midst of the student movement, which was interpreted or reflected as a fake left in the end, I did my military service and became a reserve officer, and that at the time definitely was not the cool thing to do. So now I find, as was noted, that the former student radicals have completely switched sides, like our previous Chancellor Gerhard Schröder. He recently stated that he tried to prevent as a politician what he fought for as a student. And of course we had his several people alluded to the fact that he now finally openly acknowledged that there was no United Nations Security Council backing for the bombing of Yugoslavia, which of course everybody sort of knew who has any interest in the matter, but which was still, the distinction was blurred quite successfully by our press, by our media. He also came up with this nice sentence that this was not a war, but a military action to re-establish peace. This kind of Orwellian language was quite current at the time. Of course, he said this in defense of his personal friend Putin, who, as you said already, he was built up as the current favorite big bad guy for the last 5 years or so. And as usually, the vilification of disobedient foreign leaders is done with complete disregard for the historical context. And even after, like in the case of Slobodan Milosevic, they had been treated for quite some time as trustworthy partners. So also in Germany, I think it's quite clear that Slobodan Milosevic has a firm place as a genocidal monster in the Western mythology. And as Neil Clark said, it will be hard, but we have to try to put a little bit more realism into that. At the time, I read his speech from the Kosovo field in a US-American translation, and I could not find any trace of the incitement to racial hatred that he was accused of then and still is accused of now in, like, for example, the Frankfurter Allgemeine Zeitung. So now most Germans question our military involvements in Iraq and Afghanistan, in the invasions, but still many believe, or most believe, that the interventions in Yugoslavia were necessary to stop ethnic cleansing of a systematic nature. So the Ratchak and other alleged atrocities, many of them have been, they're rarely mentioned now, and many of them have been debunked as legends, as fabrications, even in the official media. But the massacre of Srebrenica still stands fast as the major justification for unilaterally blaming the Serbs. And that's, for me, that's a difficulty in talking to people about the historical record. Possibly the showdown in The Hague, even though it, of course, is not something one would wish, and it's probably not fair, but maybe it will lead to a more realistic assessment of the situation and create some more doubts regarding the justification of the NATO intervention. During the recent developments in the Ukraine, I have been struck again by the susceptibility of far too many people for the mainstream propaganda, following all the twists and turns of the official reasoning. The residents of the former Yugoslavia probably do not know whether to laugh or to cry at the sight of the West rediscovering that there are international laws whose primary subject are sovereign states with recognized borders. Unfortunately, I fear this respect for international and national legal restrictions on declaring war and conducting war, and especially in Germany after the Second World War, we have very strong legal restrictions against wars of aggression. I think these restrictions will only be applied very selectively, and we have not been able to stop, I think, this slide into a global military intervention. After the last change of the government in Germany, there's been a concerted push by the new foreign minister, a former aide to Schröder, the new defense minister, a mother of 7 and likely successor of Merkel, and the President Gauck, who supposedly is only a figurehead. They all got together and put together a strong push to abandon our long-standing culture of military restraint and replace it with a culture of military intervention that we know from the other members of the Western Alliance. And supposedly this is now necessary, befitting our status as the economical powerhouse of Europe. This trio lamented and apologized profusely for our failure to go along with the Security Council resolution authorizing the no-fly zone over Libya, which was then used as a blank check to bomb the country into pieces. According to the polls, this latest shift in paradigm did not go down very well with the majority of the German public, so there's a similar effect that maybe was happening in England and also the States. And the public was therefore instantaneously lambasted by the conservative and liberal press commentators for this obstinate and outdated pacifism. It's always called pacifism if somebody suggests one should obey international laws. Also, of course, paired with ingratitude towards our protective allies that have supposedly shielded us so long from the dangers of the international scene. For a long time, even progressive Germans had the impression that our post-unification governments were just tagging along with the dominant NATO powers, more or less grudgingly performing our duties as allies. You are probably quite aware that there's a fair bit of evidence that this was not really at all the case during the so-called Kosovo crisis, where the German foreign and defense minister consistently sabotaged prospects for a peaceful resolution. Now we see more and more signs of imperial domination by Germany in Europe. During the recent federal elections, the southern Europeans, suffering through the austerity policies imposed by the Troika, were watching with concern and worry what the candidates had to say regarding European policies and whose arguments would carry the day. In fact, just like in the US, voters are oblivious to the huge shadow that their government policies cast over the rest of the world. Merkel and her opponent Steinbrück said very little specific regarding European policies, beyond making it clear that they would not waste our hard-earned euros on those lazy and tax-dodging Greeks. This was apparently all the public wanted to hear, and for me it was particularly sad that the war crimes committed by German troops in Afghanistan, which had really come out in the open, played no role in the election campaign either, and the responsible colonel was promoted to general. Military attacks on Syria and Iran are propagandistically already pre-approved should those so-called rogue states fail to live up to their international obligations as defined by the Western powers. So I'd really like to paint a more optimistic picture, but I think for the time being, peace is really more and more in danger. There are some individual acts of resistance. For example, recently one lieutenant of the German Air Force refused to be posted in Afghanistan as an electronics officer supporting the Operation Enduring Freedom that Bush started clearly against all international law. Two leading members of our Darmstädter Signal, of our group, had their really promising military careers interrupted and, well, really stalled because they criticized the auxiliary role that the German army and administration played in the American invasion of Iraq. And there are lots of laws, German laws, international laws, that forbade this support of an aggression. There are 12 pilots, as was found out later on, who refused to bomb Serbia 15 years ago. Unfortunately, one must say that nowadays the next aggression can probably be done fully automatically. And of course, the German military, the defense minister, they're clamoring also to get armed drones. So there's a continued slide of the Federal Republic into becoming an economic and military bully in Europe. We are already the third largest weapons exporter in the world, as you probably know. In the parliament, things are not quite as bad as in other countries. We have the Greens with about 8.6%, I think, and there are really NATO olive, they go along. But they were inched out by the Left Party, of which I happen to be a member too, who got 8.7%, which is now formally the largest opposition party, but that's not really saying much. We don't have much opposition in parliament right now. And of course, the Social Democrats often also seem to be more ballistic than even the Christian Democrats and the Free Democrats, whose last foreign minister, Westerwelle, stressed very much this culture of military restraint, and he was largely responsible for the abstention on the Libyan vote. So summing it up, I'm deeply ashamed that the lessons of the German aggressions in previous war have been largely forgotten again, or seem to be in the process of being forgotten. And I'd like to apologize for the active and leading role that Germany has played in destroying Yugoslavia, a multi-ethnic society with quite a few socially progressive aspects. But of course, let's not give up and work together for peace.